Welcome to the Audiobook Insights. Today, we embark on a profound journey into the sequel of one of the most influential business books of the 20th century. We are exploring The Eighth Habit, From Effectiveness to Greatness by Stephen R. Covey. Introduction. To understand the necessity of this book, we must first look back. When Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People in 1989, the world was a different place. That book was a manual for personal independence and interpersonal interdependence. It taught us how to be effective. It taught us how to manage ourselves and work well with others. But as the years passed, Covey realized that effectiveness is no longer enough. The world has shifted beneath our feet. We have moved from the industrial age into the knowledge worker age. In this new era, simply being effective, getting the job done, is the price of entry. It is the baseline. To truly thrive, to truly lead, and to find fulfillment in a world of infinite complexity, we must move beyond effectiveness. We must aspire to greatness. Covey argues that the call for this new habit is not just about doing more, it is about seeing differently. He observes a pervasive sense of emptiness in the modern workforce. People feel treated like objects, not whole human beings. They are managed, controlled, and bossed around, rather than unleashed. The result is a massive waste of human potential. We have organizations filled with people who have resigned themselves to mediocrity, who have checked their passion at the door, and who are operating at a fraction of their capacity. The Eighth Habit is the answer to this crisis. It is not just an add-on to the previous 7. It is a new dimension entirely. The Eighth Habit is defined simply: find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. What does Covey mean by voice? He is not talking about your singing voice or your political opinion.
Chapter 1. The Pain. Stephen Covey begins this book not with a theory, but with a diagnosis of a deep and throbbing ache that permeates the modern world. He invites us to listen to the voices of the workforce. If you could place a stethoscope on the heart of the average organization today, what would you hear? You would hear frustration, you would hear confusion, you would hear a profound sense of powerlessness. Covey describes a scene where he addresses huge audiences. He asks them a simple question: how many of you agree that the vast majority of the workforce in your organization possesses far more talent, intelligence, and creativity than their present jobs require or even allow? In almost every case, virtually every hand in the room goes up. This is the pain. It is the pain of unfulfilled potential. It is the realization that despite all our technology, all our management theories, and all our efficiency, most people feel like small cogs in a giant, indifferent machine. They feel undervalued. They feel that their true gifts, their unique voice, are locked away, unnoticed, and unused. To quantify this pain, Covey shares the startling results of a massive poll conducted by Harris Interactive of 23,000 full-time employees across key industries. The numbers are devastating. Imagine a soccer team with 11 players. If this team operated like the average modern organization, here is what you would see. Only 4 of the 11 players would know which goal is theirs. Only 2 of the 11 would care. Only 2 of the 11 would know what position they play and know exactly what they are supposed to do. And perhaps most disturbingly, all but 2 players would in some way be competing against their own team members rather than the opponent. This is the reality of the modern workplace. We have a crisis where the vast majority of people who are capable, smart, and willing, are emotionally disconnected from the work they do. They are technically employed, but they are not deployed. Their bodies are present, but their hearts and minds are elsewhere. Covey argues that this pain is not just a personal tragedy, it is an organizational catastrophe.
Chapter 2. The Problem. If Chapter 1 was the diagnosis of the symptom, the widespread pain and disengagement in the workplace, Chapter 2 is the root cause analysis. Why exactly is this happening? Why do we have millions of people who feel stifled and undervalued? Stephen Covey argues that the problem is not that people are lazy. The problem is not that managers are evil. The problem is that we are operating with a map that is fundamentally obsolete. We are suffering from a paradigm problem. To explain this, Covey takes us on a brief tour of human history. He outlines the 5 great ages of civilization. First, there was the hunter-gatherer age. Second, the agricultural age. Third, the industrial age. Fourth, the information or knowledge worker age. And finally, the emerging age of wisdom. The massive friction we feel today is caused by the fact that our management systems were built for the 3rd age, the industrial age, but we are living in the 4th age, the knowledge worker age. Let's look closely at the industrial age. This was a time of massive progress. We saw productivity increase by a factor of 50, but the philosophy that drove this progress was the machine mindset. The goal was standardization. The goal was efficiency. In a factory, you want every widget to be identical. You want 0 variance. To achieve this, the industrial age viewed the human being as a thing. It viewed people as expenses to be controlled. They were hands. We even used that language, hired hands. We didn't want their heads, and we certainly didn't want their hearts. We just wanted their manual labor to operate the machines. The management style that emerged from this era is what Covey calls the carrot and stick approach. It is essentially the jackass theory of motivation. You dangle a carrot in front of the mule to get it to move, and you hit it with a stick when it stops. This works reasonably well for manual labor. If you want someone to dig a ditch faster, you can pay them more, carrot, or threaten to fire them, stick, and they will likely dig faster. But then the world changed. The knowledge worker age arrived. Today, the vast majority of value is not created by muscle. It is created by the mind. It is created by creativity, innovation, collaboration, and judgment. And here is the crux of the problem. You cannot manage a brain the way you manage a pair of hands. You can buy a person's back with a paycheck. You can buy their presence from 9 to 5, but you cannot buy their passion. You cannot buy their creativity. You cannot force them to care. Those things are volunteered. They are given only when the person feels respected, valued, and unleashed. When we apply industrial age control tactics to knowledge age workers, we create a disaster. We treat people like things. Covey states a profound truth here. You manage things, you lead people. You manage inventory, you manage cash flow, you manage buildings. But if you try to manage people, you suppress them, you stifle their voice. The result is a culture of codependency. The boss gives orders, benevolent dictator, and the worker waits for orders, passive compliance. The worker essentially says, just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. They check their brain at the door. In the industrial age, this compliance was an asset. In the knowledge worker age, this compliance is a liability. It kills agility. It kills speed. It kills the organization's ability to solve complex problems. So the problem is that our software, our mindset, is incompatible with our hardware, our reality. We are trying to run a quantum computer with an abacus. We are suppressing the very asset, human potential, that we most desperately need to survive. We need a new paradigm. We need a new way of viewing the human being. Chapter 3, The Solution. We have identified the pain, the massive waste of human potential. We have identified the problem, the obsolete industrial age mindset that treats people like things. Now Stephen Covey presents the solution. The solution is not a new organizational chart. It is not a new compensation plan. It is a fundamental shift in how we view the human being. Covey calls this the whole person paradigm. To solve the crisis of the modern workplace, we must stop looking at employees as hired hands and start looking at them as whole people. A whole person is 4-dimensional. Covey argues that every human being is composed of 4 distinct but interrelated parts. First is the body. This represents our physical needs. In the workplace, this translates to the need to live, to have fair pay, safe working conditions, and economic survival. Second is the mind. This represents our mental capabilities. This translates to the need to learn, to grow, to develop, to be challenged, and to use our talents. Third is the heart. This represents our emotional life. This translates to the need to love, to have meaningful relationships, to be treated with kindness, and to feel passion. Fourth is the spirit. This represents our connection to purpose and principles. This translates to the need to leave a legacy,
to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, to feel that our work matters. The fundamental flaw of the industrial age model, the carrot and stick, is that it only addresses one of these four dimensions. It addresses the body. It assumes that if you pay people enough, carrot, or threaten their survival, stick, they will perform. But money only buys the body. It buys time. It does not buy the mind, the heart, or the spirit. Covey explains that when you neglect the other three dimensions, you turn a person into a thing, and people deeply resent being treated like things. When a person is treated like a thing, they make a conscious or unconscious choice to withhold their true talent. They give you compliance, but they withhold their commitment. Covey introduces a hierarchy of employee engagement to illustrate this. At the bottom is rebellion. This is active resistance. Next is malicious obedience. This is doing exactly what you are told, even if you know it is wrong or will fail. Next is willing compliance. This is the standard good employee. They follow the rules. But above that is cheerful cooperation. Above that is heartfelt commitment. And at the very top is creative excitement. The gap between the bottom, compliance, and the top, creative excitement, is where the eighth habit lives. You can buy compliance with money, but you can only get creative excitement by engaging the whole person, by challenging their mind, touching their heart, and inspiring their spirit. The solution, therefore, is to lead people as if they are fully human. It means paying them fairly, body. It means treating them with kindness and respect, heart. It means utilizing their creative talents, mind. It means serving human needs in a principled way, spirit. When you do this, when you respect the four dimensions of the human being, you unlock the door to the eighth habit. You create a culture where people can find their voice. But how does an individual actually do this? How do you, personally, tap into these four dimensions to discover your own unique significance? This takes us from the theory of the whole person to the practice of personal discovery. Narrator. Part 1. Find your voice. Chapter 4. Discover your voice, unopened birth gifts. We now begin the inward journey. Before we can lead others, and before we can inspire an organization, we must first locate the source of our own personal significance. We must discover our own voice. Stephen Covey uses a powerful metaphor to open this chapter. He asks you to imagine that you have just been given a birthday present. It is a beautiful box. You are excited. You thank the giver. You put the box on the shelf. And then you never open it. You leave it there for years. The gift gathers dust, unopened, unused, and unappreciated. Covey argues that every human being is born with three magnificent birth gifts. These are endowments that are built into our very nature. They are the keys to unlocking our potential. Yet, for the vast majority of people, these gifts remain unopened. They live their entire lives without ever realizing the immense power they possess. Finding your voice is simply the process of opening these gifts. Let us examine them one by one. The first birth gift is the freedom to choose. This concept is the foundation of all of Covey's work. He reminds us that while we are influenced by our genetics, nature, and our upbringing, nurture, we are not determined by them.
Covey famously describes the space between stimulus and response. In the animal kingdom, there is no space. If you poke a dog, it bites. Stimulus, response. The animal is programmed by instinct, but human beings possess a gap. Between what happens to us, the stimulus, and what we do about it, the response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and power to choose. We can pause, we can think, we can decide to act based on our values rather than reacting based on our moods or conditions. Covey calls this being the programmer of your own life. Most people act as if they are the program, simply running the scripts given to them by their parents or society. To find your voice, you must realize that you are the programmer. You have the power to rewrite the script. The second birth gift is natural laws or principles. If the first gift gives us the freedom to move, the second gift gives us the compass to know where to go. Covey makes a critical distinction here between values and principles. Values are internal. They are subjective. A gang of thieves has values. They value loyalty to the gang. They value secrecy. But those values are not based on reality. Principles are external.
They are objective. They are natural laws that operate regardless of whether we believe in them or not. Gravity is a principle. If you jump off a building, you will fall, no matter what your values are regarding gravity. In human relationships, principles are things like fairness, kindness, respect, honesty, and integrity. These are not inventions of society. They are laws of the universe. Covey argues that enduring success, greatness, only comes when we align our subjective values with these objective principles. If you try to build a life on the value of deception, you will eventually crash against the principle of trust, just as surely as you would crash against the ground. Finding your voice means subjecting your life to these universal laws.
It means orienting your moral compass to true north. The third birth gift is the 4 intelligences. For a long time, society has been obsessed with only one form of intelligence, IQ, or mental intelligence. We measure it in school, we hire based on it, we think smart equals successful. Covey argues that this is a dangerously narrow view. To find our voice, we must develop and integrate 4 distinct intelligences that correspond to the 4 parts of the whole person we discussed in the previous chapter. First is mental intelligence, IQ. This is our ability to analyze, reason, think abstractly, and use language. It is the intelligence of the mind. Second is physical intelligence, PQ. This is the intelligence of the body. We often take our bodies for granted, but Covey points out that the body is a miracle of complexity. It runs 75 trillion cells. It regulates your heartbeat, your digestion, and your healing, largely without your conscious effort. It constantly scans the environment for danger. Successful people respect this intelligence. They nurture their bodies through nutrition, exercise, and rest, knowing that a dead battery cannot spark a great voice. Third is emotional intelligence, EQ. This is the intelligence of the heart. It is your self-awareness, your empathy, your social sensitivity, and your ability to communicate successfully with others. Covey notes that in the business world, EQ is often far more predictive of success than IQ. We all know people with high IQs who work for people with lower IQs, but higher EQs. The ability to connect is often more powerful than the ability to calculate. Fourth is spiritual intelligence, SQ. This is the intelligence of the spirit. It is the central and most fundamental of all the intelligences because it guides the other 3. SQ is our drive for meaning and connection with the infinite. It is our conscience. It is our ability to discern true principles. It is the intelligence that asks, why are we doing this? And is this right? Covey argues that mediocrity comes from neglecting or fragmenting these intelligences. The effective person might have high IQ and high EQ. They are smart and good with people. But the great person integrates all 4. They have the physical stamina, PQ, to work hard. They have the mental clarity, IQ, to solve problems. They have the emotional maturity, EQ, to build trust. And they have the spiritual depth, SQ, to ensure they are serving a noble cause. When you open these 3 gifts, when you exercise your power to choose, align yourself with principles, and develop all 4 of your intelligences, you create the fertile soil in which your voice can grow. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the creative force of your own life. But developing these gifts requires effort. It requires a specific set of behaviors to turn these latent potentials into active powers. This leads us to the next chapter, where we learn how to express this voice through vision, discipline, passion, and conscience. Chapter 5. Express your voice, vision, discipline, passion, and conscience. We have discovered the raw materials of our potential, our birth gifts, and our 4 intelligences. Now in Chapter 5, Stephen Covey shows us how to process these materials into a finished product. He shows us what a fully expressed voice actually looks like in the real world. Covey argues that when you take the 4 intelligences we discussed, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, and you develop them to their highest level, they transform. They manifest as 4 powerful attributes of character: vision, discipline, passion, and conscience. Let us explore these 4 pillars of voice. First is vision.
Vision is the highest manifestation of the mind, mental intelligence. Most people live out of their memory. They look backward. They define themselves by their past failures, their past jobs, their past traumas. Vision is the ability to see the potential in people, projects, and causes that does not yet exist. It is applied imagination. Covey reminds us that everything is created twice. First in the mind, mental creation, and second in reality, physical creation. Vision is that first creation. It is the ability to see the oak tree in the acorn. When you have found your voice, you are not just doing a job. You are moving toward a compelling picture of a better future. Second is discipline. Discipline is the highest manifestation of the body, physical intelligence. Vision is useless with execution. You can dream of a better future, but if you cannot get out of bed and do the hard work, the vision is a hallucination. Covey defines discipline as the ability to subordinate a feeling to a value. We all have days where we feel lazy, we feel afraid, we feel like quitting. Discipline is the willpower to say to that feeling, I hear you, but we are going to do the work anyway, because the vision demands it. It is the physical price we pay to bring the vision into reality. Third is passion. Passion is the highest manifestation of the heart, emotional intelligence. This is the fire. It is the emotional connection that sustains the discipline. Covey points out that the root of the word enthusiasm is the Greek entheos, which means God within. Passion happens when your unique talent meets a great human need. It is the joy of doing something you love that actually matters. When you are passionate, you don't need to be supervised. The drive comes from the inside out. Fourth, and most critically, is conscience. Conscience is the highest manifestation of the spirit, spiritual intelligence. This is the guiding star. It is the moral compass that ensures your vision, discipline, and passion are used for good. Covey makes a stark and important point here. You can have vision, discipline, and passion and still be a monster. Adolf Hitler had tremendous vision. He had terrifying discipline. He had overwhelming passion, but he lacked conscience. He was a madman who destroyed the world. Conscience is the governor. It distinguishes the great leader from the dangerous demagogue. It asks not, can I do this, but should I do this? The eighth habit is the interplay of these four attributes. Vision sees what is possible. Discipline makes it happen. Passion feels the emotion behind it. Conscience steers the ship. Covey asks us to evaluate our own lives against these four metrics. Are you just drifting? Then you lack vision. Are you dreaming but never finishing? Then you lack discipline. Are you working hard but feeling dead inside? Then you lack passion. Are you successful but feeling guilty or unfulfilled? Then you lack conscience. When you align all four, when you see a need, vision, commit to filling it, discipline, love the work, passion, and do it for the right reasons, conscience, you have truly found your voice. This concludes part 1 of the book. We have done the internal work. We have tuned our own instrument. Now we must turn outward. We must take this voice and use it to awaken the potential in others. Part 2. Inspire others to find their voice. Chapter 6. Inspiring others to find their voice, the leadership challenge. We have arrived at the pivotal turning point of the book. Up until now, the journey has been solitary. We have focused on discovering your own voice, your own potential, and your own character. But Stephen Covey reminds us that personal greatness is not the end of the road. It is merely the prerequisite for the higher calling, leadership. In this chapter, Covey redefines the very word leadership. In the industrial age, leadership was defined by formal position. If you had the title, you were the leader. It was a noun. In the knowledge worker age, leadership is a choice. It is a verb. Covey offers one of the most beautiful and profound definitions of leadership ever written. He says, leadership is communicating to people their worth and potential so clearly that they come to see it in themselves. Let that definition sink in. It has nothing to do with command and control. It has nothing to do with being the smartest person in the room. It is an act of restoration. It is the act of holding up a mirror to the people around you, your employees, your children, your colleagues,
and showing them the greatness that they have forgotten they possess. The challenge, however, is that most organizations are designed to do the exact opposite. They are designed to communicate to people that they are replaceable, that they are small, and that they need to be managed. Covey argues that to inspire others to find their voice, you must master 4 specific leadership roles. These 4 roles map perfectly onto the 4 aspects of the whole person and the 4 attributes of voice we discussed in Part 1. First is the role of modeling. This corresponds to conscience and the spirit. Before you can ask others to trust you, you must be trustworthy. You must model the behavior you want to see. You can't ask for collaboration if you are competitive.
You can't ask for integrity if you are dishonest. Modeling is the foundation. Without it, everything else is just manipulation. Second is the role of pathfinding. This corresponds to vision and the mind. Modeling is not enough. You have to go somewhere. The leader must create order out of chaos. They must involve people in the process of defining the vision and the strategy. Pathfinding connects the team together in a shared purpose. Third is the role of aligning. This corresponds to discipline and the body. This is where most organizations fail. You can have a great leader, model, and a great strategy, pathfinding, but if the systems of the organization, the compensation, the hiring, the training, reward the wrong behavior, you will fail. Aligning is the plumbing. It ensures that the structures of the organization do not fight against the spirit of the people. Fourth is the role of empowering. This corresponds to passion and the heart. If you have modeled trust, found a path, and aligned the systems, your job is then to get out of the way. Empowering is the fruit of the other 3 roles. It is clearing the obstacles so that people's talent and passion can flow freely. The leadership challenge is to execute these 4 roles simultaneously. Most leaders are only good at 1 or 2. The nice guy leader is good at empowering, but bad at pathfinding, no direction. The dictator leader is good at pathfinding, but terrible at empowering, no passion. The 8th habit demands that we integrate all 4. We must be the model, conscience, the pathfinder, vision, the aligner, discipline, and the empowerer, passion. This framework sets the stage for the remainder of the book. We are now going to dissect these roles one by one, starting with the most personal and fundamental role of all, the voice of influence. Narrator, focus, modeling, and pathfinding. Chapter 7, the voice of influence. Be a trim tab. We now zoom in on the first of the 4 leadership roles, modeling. Before you can lead a team, you must lead yourself. Before you can change an organization, you must change your own behavior. This chapter is about the physics of personal power. Stephen Covey introduces a metaphor here that is perhaps the most empowering image in the entire book. He asks us to look at a massive ocean liner or a giant aircraft carrier. These ships are enormous. They weigh thousands of tons. They have tremendous momentum. How do you turn such a massive thing? You might think you turn it with the rudder, and you would be partially correct. The rudder is the big metal slab at the back of the ship that directs the flow of water. But in these giant ships, the rudder itself is too heavy to be moved directly by the water pressure. It would snap the hydraulics. So engineers designed a brilliant mechanism. On the trailing edge of the giant rudder, there is a tiny, miniature rudder. It is called a trim tab. When the captain wants to turn the ship, he actually turns the trim tab first. The trim tab moves in the opposite direction, creating a small vacuum of low pressure that pulls the giant rudder around. The giant rudder then turns the ship. Covey applies this engineering principle to human organizations. The organization is the ship. It is heavy, slow, and resistant to change. The senior management is the rudder. They are big and powerful, but often stuck under immense pressure. You, the individual contributor, the middle manager, the person reading this book, you are the trim tab. You may feel small. You may feel like you lack authority. But by moving your small part of the universe, by demonstrating consistent excellence, by building trust, by showing a new way of working, you create the low pressure that pulls the massive rudder of management, which eventually turns the entire ship. This is the voice of influence. Most people wait for the ship to turn. They say, "I'll be more creative when the boss gives me permission," or "I'll be more trustworthy when the culture changes." The trim tab says, "I will move first."
Covey reconnects this to the concept of the circle of influence from the 7 Habits. The circle of concern is everything you worry about. The economy, the war, the CEO's bad mood. You have no control over these. The circle of influence is what you can actually do. When you focus on the circle of concern, you become a victim. You blame, you complain, your voice shrinks. When you focus on the circle of influence, when you act as a trim tab, your influence expands. How do you actually do this? You do it by taking initiative. Covey outlines levels of initiative. The lowest level is wait until told. This is the behavior of a machine. The next level is ask. The next is make a recommendation. The highest level is do it and report immediately. A trim tab operates at the level of make a recommendation or do it and report. They don't go to their boss with a problem. They go to their boss with a problem and a solution. They say, I saw this gap, I did the research, and here is a plan to fix it. Do I have your approval to proceed? By doing the legwork, by moving the trim tab, they make it easy for the rudder, the boss, to move. This chapter destroys the excuse of, I have no power. Covey argues that you always have the power to be a model. You always have the power to be a light, not a judge, a model, not a critic. But to be a successful trim tab, to move that heavy rudder without snapping, you need something very specific. You need structural integrity. You need people to believe in you. This leads us directly to the currency of leadership, trust. Chapter 8, The Voice of Trustworthiness, Modeling Character and Competence. We have established that you can influence any organization, regardless of your position, by acting as a trim tab. But there is a catch. A trim tab only works if it is solid.
If it is flimsy, the pressure of the ocean will snap it off. In human terms, that solidity is called trustworthiness. Stephen Covey makes a critical grammatical distinction here. We often talk about trust as a noun. We say, I want more trust in my team. But you cannot just demand trust. Trust is a verb. It is something you do or give. Trustworthiness is a noun. It is something you are. You cannot increase trust directly. You can only increase your own trustworthiness. If you are trustworthy, trust will follow as a natural consequence. So, what makes a person trustworthy? Is it just being honest? Covey argues that honesty is only half the picture. Trustworthiness is the combination of 2 vital components, character and competence. Think of a doctor. If a doctor is the most honest, kind, and ethical person in the world, high character, but they have no idea how to perform surgery, low competence, would you trust them to operate on you? No. Conversely, if a doctor is a brilliant surgeon, high competence, but is known to perform unnecessary surgeries just to make money, low character, would you trust them? No. To be a voice of influence, you must model both. Let's break them down. Component 1, character. Character is what you are when no one is watching. Covey identifies 3 essential traits of high character. Integrity. This is more than honesty, telling the truth. Integrity means integration. It means your words and your reality match. It means you keep promises. Maturity. Covey defines maturity as the balance between courage and consideration. Can you speak the hard truth, courage, while still respecting the feelings of the other person, consideration? The nice guy has consideration but no courage. The tyrant has courage but no consideration. The mature leader has both. Abundance mentality. This is the belief that there is enough for everyone. People with a scarcity mentality view life as a pie. If you get a slice, that means I get less.
They hoard credit. They hoard information. People with an abundance mentality share credit, share power, and celebrate the success of others. Component 2, competence. Competence is what you can do. Covey breaks this down into 3 areas. Technical competence. Do you actually have the skills to do the job? Conceptual competence. Can you see the big picture? Do you understand the strategy? Interdependent competence. This is the 8th habit dimension. Do you have the ability to interact effectively with others? Can you listen? Can you collaborate?
The synergy of character and competence creates wisdom. When you have high character but low competence, you are well-meaning but ineffective. When you have high competence but low character, you are dangerous and manipulative. When you have both, you are trustworthy.
Covey emphasizes that modeling this trustworthiness is the most efficient thing you can do as a leader. Why? Because it eliminates the need for politics. In a low-trust environment, you have to watch your back. You have to document everything. You have to speak in code. In a high-trust environment, communication is instant. You say, "I'll handle it," and everyone moves on because they know you will handle it. So if you want to find your voice and inspire others, look in the mirror. Are you keeping your promises? Are you upgrading your skills? Are you operating with an abundance mentality? The moment you start modeling these traits, the trim tab begins to turn, and the culture around you begins to shift. But trust is not just a soft social virtue. It has a hard economic impact. This leads us to the next chapter, where we discover that trust is actually a variable that affects the speed and cost of everything we do. Chapter 9. The Voice and Speed of Trust. We have defined what trust is, the combination of character and competence. Now in Chapter 9, Stephen Covey moves from the moral dimension of trust to the economic dimension. He makes a claim that shocks many hardened business executives. Trust is the most significant financial variable in your organization. Usually, when we think of trust, we think of it as a nice-to-have social virtue. It is warm and fuzzy. It belongs in the realm of ethics or human resources. We do not see it on the balance sheet. Covey argues that this is a massive error. He introduces the concept of the speed of trust. The core premise is simple. Trust always affects two measurable outcomes, speed and cost. When trust goes down, speed goes down, and cost goes up. When trust goes up, speed goes up, and cost goes down. To illustrate this, Covey uses the universal example of post-9/11 airport security. Before the 9/11 attacks, trust was relatively high. You could arrive at the airport 20 minutes before your flight. You could walk to the gate to hug your family member goodbye. Security was fast and cheap. After the attacks, trust plummeted. Because we could not trust the intentions of passengers, we had to implement massive verification systems. Now you have to arrive 2 hours early. You have to take off your shoes. You have to go through scanners. You pay a security fee on every ticket. Speed went down, cost went up. Why? Because trust was lost. Covey calls this the low trust tax. In an organization, this tax is everywhere, though it is often hidden. Think about micromanagement. What is micromanagement? It is a tax you pay because you do not trust your employee to do the job. You pay it in your time and their morale. Think about bureaucracy, excessive rules, 7 layers of approval for a $50 expense, long legal contracts. These are all mechanisms designed to compensate for a lack of trust. They are expensive and they are slow. Think about office politics. When you have to spend hours writing an email just right so that no one gets offended, or so that you have a paper trail to protect yourself, that is a tax. It is wasted time that adds zero value to the customer. On the flip side, Covey talks about the high trust dividend. When trust is high, everything moves faster. Consider the acquisition of YouTube by Google. It was a billion-dollar deal. In a low-trust environment, that deal would have taken months of due diligence, armies of lawyers, and endless negotiation. But because the key players knew each other and trusted each other, the deal was sealed in less than a week. That is speed. That is a dividend. In a high-trust team, communication is efficient. You don't need to finish your sentences. You don't need to write a memo to confirm a conversation. You say, "I'm on it," and the other person moves on, fully confident. Covey provides a formula to explain this impact. Strategy plus execution times trust equals results.
Chapter 10. Blending Voices. Searching for the Third Alternative. We have built the foundation of personal character, finding your voice, and interpersonal trust, the speed of trust. Now we arrive at the summit of human interaction. This chapter explores the most dynamic and creative skill in the 8th habit repertoire, the ability to create a third alternative. Stephen Covey begins by identifying a tragic flaw in how most people handle conflict. When two people disagree, we tend to see only two possible outcomes. Outcome 1 is my way. I win, you lose. I dominate you.
Outcome 2 is your way. You win, I lose, I capitulate to you. If we are civilized, we often aim for a middle ground called compromise. We think compromise is a virtue. We say, let's meet halfway. But Covey argues that compromise is actually a form of lose-lose. In a compromise, 1 + 1 = 1.5. I give up a little of what I want, you give up a little of what you want. We end up with a watered-down solution that excites no one. It is the path of least resistance, not the path of greatness. The 8th habit challenges us to reject compromise and seek synergy. Synergy is the third alternative. It is not my way, and it is not your way. It is a better way. It is a higher way. In synergy, 1 + 1 = 3 or 10 or 100. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Covey explains that the third alternative is born when two unique voices blend together to create something that neither could have created alone. Think of a metal alloy. Bronze is stronger than copper and stronger than tin. It is not just copper plus tin, it is a new substance entirely. But why is this so rare? Why do we settle for compromise? Because synergy requires a massive amount of emotional security. Most people are threatened by differences. If you disagree with me, I feel attacked. My ego says, if I am right, you must be wrong. So I defend my position. I stop listening. The leader who has found their voice realizes that difference is an asset, not a threat. If two people have the exact same opinion, one of them is unnecessary. The value of the other person is precisely in their difference. You want them to see what you miss. Covey outlines a specific 2-step process to reach the third alternative. Step 1. The question. When you are in a conflict, you stop the battle and ask, would you be willing to search for a solution that is better than what either of you or I have proposed? This question changes the geometry of the conflict. It moves you from standing face-to-face, confrontation, to standing shoulder-to-shoulder, cooperation, looking at the problem together. It engages the spirit of creativity. Step 2. The criterion. You agree to a simple rule. No one can make their point until they have restated the other person's point to that person's satisfaction. This is the application of empathic listening. You have to listen, not to reply, but to understand. You have to listen until you can say, so what you are really worried about is X, and what you value is Y. Only when the other person says, yes, that's exactly it, are you allowed to make your own point. When you do this, when you genuinely understand the other person's constraints, and they understand yours, the magic happens. You stop fighting for my way, and you start inventing. Well, if you need speed and I need quality, what if we did? Suddenly a new idea emerges, an idea that meets your needs and my needs better than our original proposals. That is the third alternative. This is the ultimate expression of blending voices. It turns conflict into a creative engine. It turns the noise of disagreement into the harmony of innovation. But blending voices is not enough if you don't know where you are going. You need a map. This leads us to the second leadership role, pathfinding.
Chapter 11. One Voice. Pathfinding Shared Vision, Values, and Strategy. We have now established a high-trust culture. We have learned to blend our voices to create third alternatives. But a team that trusts each other and gets along is still useless if they are running in the wrong direction. This brings us to the second leadership role, pathfinding. Pathfinding is the process of uniting diverse voices into one voice. It is the creation of a shared map that tells everyone exactly where the organization is going and why it matters. Stephen Covey begins this chapter by critiquing the traditional way companies create their mission statements. We have all seen it. The senior executives go to a fancy off-site retreat for a weekend. They hire a consultant. They brainstorm words like excellence, innovation, and integrity. They come back on Monday morning with a bronze plaque or a glossy poster. They announce the new mission to the employees, and the employees roll their eyes. Why? Because it is not their mission. It is the boss's mission. Covey introduces a fundamental psychological principle here. No involvement, no commitment. If you want people to commit to a vision, they must have a hand in creating it. If you just hand them a strategy, they will treat it like a foreign object.
They might comply with it, but they won't own it. But if you ask them, where do you think we should go? What do you value? How can we win? They become co-authors of the future. Covey says, people do not argue with their own data. Pathfinding, therefore, is not about the leader climbing the mountain alone and bringing down the stone tablets. It is about the leader facilitating a conversation that allows the entire team to decide which mountain to climb. This creates one voice. One voice does not mean everyone thinks exactly the same way. That would be a cult. One voice means that despite our different roles and different talents, we are all singing from the same sheet of music. We all agree on the melody. Covey breaks pathfinding down into 3 specific deliverables. First is vision. This is the destination. What does winning look like in 5 years? Second is values. These are the guardrails. What principles will we never violate, no matter how much money we could make? Third is strategy. This is the route. Given our limited resources and a competitive landscape, how specifically will we achieve the vision? But who are we doing this for? Covey insists that pathfinding must be centered on the stakeholder. The industrial age focused only on the shareholder, the owner. The knowledge worker age recognizes that an organization is an ecosystem. You have to serve the customer, the employee, the owner, and the community. If you exploit the employee to serve the owner, the employee leaves and the business dies. If you exploit the customer to serve the employee, the customer leaves and the business dies. Pathfinding is the delicate art of finding the strategic sweet spot where the needs of all 4 stakeholders overlap. Finally, Covey addresses the concept of the strategic scoreboard. A vision is vague. A strategy can be complex. To create focus, the leader must translate the strategy into a compelling scoreboard. People play differently when they are keeping score. Imagine a group of kids shooting baskets at a park. They are goofing around. Now imagine you blow a whistle and say, okay, whoever makes the most baskets in the next 2 minutes wins $10. Instantly, the energy changes, the focus intensifies, the voice of the group unifies around a clear goal. Pathfinding involves creating that scoreboard for the organization. It answers the question, are we winning or losing right now? When a leader performs the role of pathfinding well, the organization moves from confusion to clarity. The fog of work lifts. Every person, from the janitor to the CEO, can look at the map and say, I know where we are going, and I know how I help us get there. But knowing where to go is one thing. Actually walking the path is another. This brings us to the 3rd leadership role and the place where most organizations stumble: execution. Execution, aligning and empowering. Chapter 12, The Voice and Discipline of Execution, Aligning Goals and Systems for Results. We now enter the realm of the practical. We have moved from the personal, finding your voice, to the interpersonal, trust, to the strategic, pathfinding. Now we face the hardest challenge in business: execution. Stephen Covey begins this chapter with a sobering statistic. Most organizations fail not because they have bad strategies, but because they cannot execute the strategies they have. He calls this the execution gap. Why does this gap exist? It exists because of a failure of alignment. Alignment is the 3rd leadership role. It corresponds to the body and the attribute of discipline. If pathfinding is deciding where to drive the car and modeling is being a safe driver, alignment is building the car itself. It is the plumbing of the organization. Covey argues that you can have a team of high-trust, passionate people with a brilliant vision, but if the systems of the organization are misaligned, they will fail. Imagine a manager who preaches teamwork, collaboration, synergy, pathfinding, but then at the end of the year, he creates his employees on a bell curve where only one person can get the top bonus. What is the system telling the employees? It is telling them, destroy your neighbor, hoard information, win at all costs. When the system fights the vision, the system always wins. The role of the leader is to be a social engineer.
You must look at every structure in your organization: training, hiring, compensation, communication, budgeting, and ask, does this reinforce our values or does it contradict them? To solve the execution gap, Covey introduces the framework that would later evolve into its own massive body of work, a wildly important goal. A WIG must be specific. Improve customer service is not a WIG. Increase our Net Promoter Score from 40 to 60 by December 31st is a WIG. The 8th habit requires the discipline to say no to good ideas so you can say yes to the few great ones. Discipline 2. Act on lead measures.
Most leaders manage by looking in the rearview mirror. They look at lag measures, profit, revenue, weight loss. By the time you get that data, it is too late to change it. Great execution requires focusing on lead measures. These are the predictive actions that you can influence now. If your lag measure is lose 10 pounds, your lead measures are calories eaten and hours exercised. If your lag measure is sales revenue, your lead measure might be number of proposals sent. Aligning your team means getting everyone obsessed with moving the lead measures. Discipline 3. Keep a compelling scoreboard. People play differently when they are keeping score. Covey notes that if you go to a bowling alley and put up a curtain so people can't see the pins fall, they will stop bowling. They need feedback. The scoreboard must be simple. It must be visible. It must tell you instantly if you are winning or losing.
Chapter 13. The Empowering Voice, Releasing Passion and Talent. We have arrived at the fourth and final leadership role, empowering. Stephen Covey often described this role as the fruit of the other three. If modeling is the root, pathfinding is the trunk, and aligning is the branches, then empowering is the fruit. It is the result. Most leaders want empowered employees. They want people who take initiative, who solve problems on their own, and who care deeply about the work. But Covey argues that you cannot just walk into a room and declare, "You are empowered." If you try to empower people without first building trust, modeling, without defining the goal, pathfinding, and without fixing the systems, aligning, you create chaos. You create anxiety. The employees will say, "You told me to take charge, but you didn't tell me where we are going, and the system punishes me if I make a mistake." True empowerment is not abandonment. It is autonomy within boundaries. In this chapter, Covey introduces the specific tool used to create this autonomy, the win-win performance agreement.
This is not a job description. A job description lists activities. A win-win agreement lists results. It transfers the responsibility for the method from the manager to the employee. It says, "I don't care how you do it, as long as you achieve this result within these guidelines." A win-win agreement has 5 specific elements. First, desired results. You must agree on what done looks like. It must be specific and measurable. The leader and the employee create this together. Second, guidelines. These are the boundaries. What are the legal, ethical, or budgetary constraints? These should be as few as possible, but as rigid as necessary. Covey calls this the sandbox. Inside the sandbox, you are free. Outside the sandbox, you are out of bounds. Third, resources. What budget, training, technology, or access does the person need to succeed? The leader's job is to provide the ammo. Fourth, accountability. This is the game changer. In a traditional model, the boss evaluates the employee. In an empowered model, the employee evaluates themselves. They agree on the standard up front. Then, at the end of the period, the employee comes to the leader and says, "Here is how I did against our agreement." The leader's job is mostly to verify, not to judge. Fifth, consequences. What happens if the goal is met? Financial rewards, promotion, more freedom. What happens if it is not? When this agreement is in place, the role of the leader shifts fundamentally. You are no longer a cop policing the employee. You become a servant leader. Your job is to run alongside the employee and ask, "How is it going? What are you learning? How can I help?" You are there to remove obstacles, not to micromanage tasks. Covey calls this the shift from gopher delegation to stewardship delegation. Gopher delegation is, go for this, go for that, do this, do that. It focuses on methods. The boss is the brain, the worker is the hands. Stewardship delegation focuses on results. It engages the employee's brain and heart. It treats them as a steward of their own area of responsibility. This is the ultimate expression of the 8th habit. When you empower someone, you are essentially saying, "I see your worth. I trust your talent. Here is the vision. Now find your voice and fly." The leader steps back, and the latent potential of the human being steps forward. This concludes the section on the 4 roles of leadership. We have built the complete engine of greatness. Now, in the final section of the book, Covey steps back to look at the broader context of our lives and our society. He calls this the Age of Wisdom. The Age of Wisdom. Chapter 14, The Eighth Habit and the Sweet Spot. We have now traversed the entire landscape of the Eighth Habit framework. We have started with the individual discovering their own voice. We have expanded to the leader inspiring others through the 4 roles of modeling, pathfinding, aligning, and empowering. Now Stephen Covey brings these threads together into a single cohesive image. He calls it the sweet spot. In sports, the sweet spot is that precise point on a tennis racket or a golf club where the ball creates the maximum power with the minimum effort. When you hit the sweet spot, it feels effortless. The ball just flies. When you miss the sweet spot, you feel the vibration. It hurts. You work hard, but the ball goes nowhere. Covey argues that most organizations are missing the sweet spot. They are vibrating with friction, politics, and waste. They are working hard, but the ball isn't moving. To find the organizational sweet spot, we must solve the 4 chronic problems that plague almost every modern workplace. Covey maps these problems directly to the 4 leadership roles we have just mastered. Problem 1 is low trust. This corresponds to the spirit or conscience. The symptom is hidden agendas, backstabbing, and cynicism. The solution is modeling. When leaders model integrity, trust returns. Problem 2 is no shared vision. This corresponds to the mind or vision. The symptom is confusion. People are busy, but they are all rowing in different directions. The solution is pathfinding. When leaders clarify the shared purpose, focus returns.
Problem 3 is misalignment. This corresponds to the body or discipline. The symptom is bureaucracy and rivalry. The systems fight the people. You preach teamwork but pay for individual performance. The solution is aligning. When leaders build systems that reinforce the vision, leverage returns. Problem 4 is disempowerment. This corresponds to the heart or passion. The symptom is boredom and apathy. People are just waiting for 5 o'clock. The solution is empowering. When leaders release the talent of the team, passion returns. The sweet spot is the space in the center where all 4 of these solutions overlap. It is the magical state where you have a high-trust team, modeling, committed to a clear vision, pathfinding, supported by perfect systems, aligning, and fueled by inner passion, empowering. Covey places this entire framework within the context of a new historical era, the Age of Wisdom. He explains the hierarchy of human understanding. First, we had data, raw facts. Then we had information, data with context. Then we had knowledge, information with utility. We are currently drowning in the knowledge worker age. We have more knowledge than we can handle. But knowledge alone is not enough. You can have the knowledge to build a nuclear bomb, but that doesn't tell you whether you should use it. The next frontier is wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge infused with principles. It is knowledge directed by conscience. The 8th habit is ultimately a manual for entering the age of wisdom. It teaches us that greatness is not just about being smart, knowledge. It is about being good, wisdom. It is about using our voice to serve human needs in a principled way. When an organization operates in the age of wisdom, when it hits the sweet spot, it becomes unshakable.
Chapter 15, Using Our Voices Wisely to Serve Others. We have reached the final chapter of our journey. We have found our voice. We have learned the tools of leadership. We have learned to build trust and execute strategy. But Stephen Covey reserves the most important question for last. For what purpose? You can find your voice, become a brilliant leader, and build a massive, efficient organization and still be a force for evil. History is full of charismatic leaders who found their voices and used them to destroy. In this final chapter, Covey argues that the true age of wisdom requires a fundamental shift in our orientation. We must move from a mindset of success to a mindset of significance. Success is about what you get. It is about money, status, and accolades. Significance is about what you give. It is about service. Covey reintroduces the concept of moral authority. In the industrial age, authority came from position. You were the boss because you held the title. In the knowledge worker age, authority comes from utility. You are the leader because you are useful. But in the age of wisdom, true leadership relies on moral authority. Moral authority is not granted by a board of directors. It is earned through the quality of your character and the depth of your sacrifice. It comes from the conscious decision to use your voice to serve others rather than to serve yourself. Covey draws a distinction between self-actualization and self-transcendence. Psychology often tells us that the highest human need is self-actualization, to be the best me I can be. Covey argues that there is a level above that. To truly find your voice, you must forget yourself. You must lose yourself in a cause greater than yourself.
He quotes the Viktor Frankl principle. Success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. The eighth habit, ultimately, is not a habit of self-promotion. It is a habit of service. It is the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student, not for the overtime pay, but because they see the student's potential. It is the manager who takes the blame for a failure to protect their team and gives away the credit for a success to build their team. It is the parent who sacrifices their own comfort to instill principles in their child. When you use your voice to serve, you create a legacy. You create a ripple effect that outlasts your physical life. Conclusion. We have now explored the depth and breadth of the eighth habit from effectiveness to greatness. We began with a diagnosis of the pain, the universal feeling of being undervalued and stuck in a system that treats people like things. We identified the solution, the whole person paradigm, acknowledging that every human being has a body, a mind, a heart, and a spirit. We walked the path of the individual, finding your voice by opening your birth gifts and developing the 4 attributes of vision, discipline, passion, and conscience. We walked the path of the leader, inspiring others by modeling trust, pathfinding a shared vision, aligning systems, and empowering people. Stephen Covey leaves us with a final challenge. The world is noisy. There are millions of voices screaming for attention. Most of them are echoing the complaints of the victim, blaming the government, blaming the economy, blaming the boss. You have a choice. You can join that chorus of complaints. You can choose the path of mediocrity. You can suppress your talent, ignore your conscience, and live a life of quiet desperation. Or you can choose the eighth habit. You can choose to listen to that still, small voice inside you.
You can choose to be a trim tab, to be the person who changes the course of the ship, no matter how small your position. You can choose to treat the people around you not as things to be managed, but as human beings with infinite potential to be unleashed. The transition from effectiveness to greatness is not a function of luck. It is a function of choice. It is a choice that you must make every single day. It is the choice to find your voice, and then, with great humility and love, to turn outward and help others find theirs. That is the definition of greatness. Thank you for listening to these audiobook insights. We hope this deep dive into Stephen Covey's work has given you the map you need to navigate the journey ahead.